They mocked Earth. They mocked our strength. But when the alien king called humanity cowards, he made one fatal mistake. He insulted a human mother whose son he had taken. Witness what happens when a single parent's fury becomes more terrifying than any war fleet. And if this story hits your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more HFY legends. They mocked Earth. They mocked humans. Across the void, the Khar'Zhul Dominion's flagship broadcast a message to the galaxy, a taunt wrapped in arrogance, a declaration meant to crush the fragile spirit of an insignificant species. The Alien King, Varkalon the Unbroken, spoke with the authority of an empire that had never known defeat. His voice echoed through the communication networks, amplified across star systems, as he called humanity cowards, soft-skinned weaklings unworthy of survival. A species fit only to serve. Planets trembled under his words, and distant civilizations bowed in fear, assuming this proclamation was absolute truth. Yet, among the prisoners watching from their confinement, one human's eyes burned with a different kind of fire, a fire that no empire could extinguish. Hale, a single mother, stared at the screen with clenched fists, her mind frozen for a heartbeat before fury began to spread like wildfire. Her son, Eli, had been taken just a week ago, ripped from the small colony they had tried to call home. He was 8 years old, bright, fearless in ways that made his mother proud and terrified at the same time. She had imagined a future together, sunlight on their garden, laughter echoing down the corridors of their tiny home, evenings reading stories until sleep stole them. That future had been stolen in a single, ruthless sweep. Now, as the alien king's face filled the holographic screen, Mara's grief crystallized into something sharper, colder, more dangerous. The Empire believed they had captured humans, broken them, reduced them to nothing but scared animals. They were wrong. They had underestimated not just her, but every human who had ever fought against impossible odds. They had underestimated the fury of a mother protecting her child. Around her, the alien prisoners murmured in resigned fear, whispering about the futility of resistance. Mara listened, weighing every word, noting every glance, every nervous tick. The Khar'Zhul guards walked past, towering and armored, muscles coiled like weapons, eyes that measured her as though she were nothing more than a fragile, emotional anomaly. She let them think that. She let the whispers of her fellow prisoners fill the air as she crouched in the corner, silent and unassuming. But inside, her mind was alive with plans, contingencies, calculations. She had survived worse than captivity. She had survived loss. She had survived being alone in a world that refused to bend to her will. And she would survive this too, not for herself, but for Eli. Every guard, every alarm, every pulse of the ship's sensors became part of a map in her mind, every weakness catalogued, every escape route memorized. She studied the routines, the hierarchy, the overconfidence that blinded the Khar'Zhul to their own vulnerabilities. Her own pain, raw and consuming, became a tool. She remembered her husband, gone years ago, and the quiet lessons he had left: patience, resourcefulness, the courage to act when the odds seemed impossible. She remembered the moments before Eli had been taken, the hug too long, the fear that maybe she could not protect him, and the sudden clarity that she would do anything, break any law, defy any army, to get him back. The alien king did not see her yet, did not know her as more than a human, a fragile specimen. That arrogance, that hubris, would be his undoing. Mara's eyes narrowed, and in the reflection of the cold metallic walls around her, one thought burned brighter than fear, brighter than grief: he called us cowards. He shouldn't have taken my child. She remembered stories of the Empire's conquests, battles they had won through sheer intimidation, fleets that had crushed entire worlds. Mara imagined every single one of them, the soldiers and commanders, and realized that all of it depended on their targets believing in their inevitability, on the assumption that no one would fight back. That assumption was what she would shatter. Every whispered doubt from her fellow prisoners was an opportunity, every guard's arrogance a doorway to freedom. She would use their expectations against them. She would become what they had never anticipated: cunning, relentless, unstoppable, fueled by love and rage. Even now, in the dim light of the holding area, Mara began forming strategies. How to move silently through corridors, how to avoid patrols, how to turn the ship's own technology against its masters. She considered alliances, noting the prisoners who might follow if someone dared to lead. And when she thought of Eli, strapped and frightened, she felt a surge of strength unlike anything she had known before. It was raw, instinctive, primal, the kind of force that could topple empires if properly focused. She would not scream, she would not collapse in despair. She would act. Every second wasted was a second closer to the harm of her child. And Mara Hale did not waste seconds. The other prisoners began to notice her resolve, drawn to it instinctively. The insected engineer, small and trembling, watched as Mara silently calculated every move. The reptilian warrior, eyes narrowed, observed her without comment, recognizing something rare, a human who would not yield. They had been broken in spirit, or at least so they thought. She moved among them like a shadow, giving no outward sign of her intentions, yet every subtle gesture, every glance, every whispered word began to stitch together a plan for rebellion. The Khar'Zhul thought they had stripped humans of courage, yet here was proof that bravery could come in forms they never imagined. They had never faced someone willing to risk everything for the life of one child, someone whose fury would not be contained by fear or force. Mara allowed herself a small, quiet smile as the Alien King's broadcast continued, his arrogance shining like a beacon for all to see. Let him call them cowards. Let him sneer at humanity. The galaxy would remember the day a mother became more than a soldier, more than a threat, she became a storm, a reckoning. And Mara Hale would ensure that no one, not the Khar'Zhul, not the king, ever forgot the lesson that humans, when pushed beyond their limits, were unstoppable. His words had been intended to humiliate, to demoralize. Instead, they ignited the fire that would consume his fleet, his empire, and shatter every assumption he had ever held about humanity. He had not just taken a child, he had awoken a wrath no machine, no army, no alien could contain. And in the cold metallic silence of her cell, Mara whispered under her breath, a promise as sharp as a blade, as unyielding as steel. He called us cowards. He shouldn't have taken my child. Mara Hale did not wait. Every second she lingered in the cell, every heartbeat spent in silence, strengthened the resolve building inside her. The Khar'Zhul believed they had reduced her to grief, a passive shell crushed under the weight of their power. They were wrong. Pain and loss had always been the catalysts of her survival, shaping her mind into a weapon as precise and unforgiving as any forged in the Empire's laboratories. Her training, forgotten by her captors, returned in sharp, clear flashes. Years of search and rescue missions, years of navigating impossible terrain and life-threatening situations, had taught her how to read people, how to anticipate action, how to exploit weaknesses. She would not stumble blindly, she would strike with purpose. The first step was observation. Every guard's rhythm, every patrol's schedule, every pause in their mechanical routine became data she stored in her mind. She noted the shortest routes between checkpoints, the blind spots in the surveillance network, the overconfidence that made them predictable. She understood the value of patience. The Khar'Zhul were strong, intimidating, relentless, but their arrogance blinded them. They saw humans as fragile, emotional, incapable of long-term strategy. That perception would become their undoing. Mara's fingers traced the edges of the cold walls, memorizing each rivet, each seam, as if they were threads in a tapestry she would unravel. She allowed herself to appear weak, to cry softly when the guards glanced in her direction, to let them see the grief they assumed made her harmless. All the while, her mind was calculating, planning, shaping the chaos she would unleash. Eli's face haunted her, bright eyes and crooked grin, fearless and trusting. That image became her compass, guiding every choice. She pictured him in the reconditioning chamber, strapped to the cold table, electrodes poised to erase memory, to bend his mind to alien will. The thought ignited a controlled fury within her, not chaos, but precise, focused determination. She would reach him. She would destroy anyone who stood in her way. And in that drive, she found an instinctual clarity. Survival depended not on brute force alone, but on ingenuity. Humans, small and underestimated, had always thrived where brute strength failed, where patience and cunning outmaneuvered the predictable. She moved quietly through the holding area, noting the prisoners around her, recognizing allies among the despair. A timid insectoid engineer, his limbs shaking from fear, caught her eye. No words passed between them, yet understanding blossomed instantly. Another, a silent reptilian warrior, sat hunched, observing everything, his eyes reflecting an understanding that Mara respected. She began to weave connections, subtle gestures and quiet communication that suggested leadership without proclamation. The Khar'Zhul had never seen it, could not imagine it, the quiet, unrelenting force of humans who refused to be crushed. Together, they would become a storm, and Mara was the spark. She tested the ship's infrastructure with cautious movements, identifying ventilation shafts narrow enough for escape, maintenance tunnels that led behind layers of security, and discarded machinery that could be repurposed as weapons or tools. Every obstacle became an opportunity. Every weakness, however small, would be exploited. The guards, confident in their supremacy, never anticipated that intelligence could masquerade as weakness, that grief could conceal strategy. Mara smiled faintly at the thought. They would pay for every insult, every taunt, every word that had called humanity cowards. Her mind worked in layers. While planning the physical escape, she devised contingencies for confrontation, improvising weapons from scraps, imagining traps from discarded panels, predicting enemy behavior based on observation and instinct. The Empire had conquered worlds because they underestimated their victims. Mara would invert that assumption entirely. Every soldier they sent, every alarm triggered, would play into her design. She envisioned herself moving like a shadow, precise and unstoppable, leading the prisoners to freedom. At night, when the ship's hum softened, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. Humans were resilient because they felt deeply, because loss and love intertwined to forge courage that could not be replicated. Her fury for Eli was not blind rage. It was a weapon tempered by clarity, sharpened by empathy, guided by instinct and experience. The Khar'Zhul, for all their strength and technology, lacked this subtlety. They had never understood the human mind, the human heart, the lengths to which one would go to protect a child. Every observation fed into her strategy. She recognized patterns, which guards favored intimidation over surveillance, which corridors had the slowest patrol cycles, where the ship's security systems lagged. She began to memorize the layout, visualizing movement through the labyrinthine structure, simulating resistance, escape, and the retrieval of Eli. There was no room for hesitation. Every action had to be deliberate. The prisoners who had begun to notice her determination now followed instinctively. They did not question. They understood that the human woman carried a force beyond comprehension, a mixture of intelligence, courage, and a personal vendetta that made her unstoppable. Mara's patience was her weapon. The Empire had tried to break her spirit with isolation, with threats, with displays of technological might. Each attempt had only refined her determination. She allowed herself to feel grief, to remember loss, but she converted every emotion into action. They would learn, too late, that humans did not merely react, they adapted, they anticipated, and when necessary, they became unstoppable. Mara began to plan the first moves of her rebellion, disabling security nodes, guiding the engineer to sabotage energy systems, using the reptilian warrior's strength for protection and intimidation. Every detail was rehearsed mentally, every possibility accounted for, every misstep anticipated. When she looked at the guards, she saw their overconfidence as clearly as she saw their weapons. They believed strength was enough. They did not understand that intelligence, determination, and focused emotion could topple even the mightiest adversary. Mara knew the Empire's greatest weakness was the assumption that humans could be intimidated, that emotion equaled fragility. She would dismantle that assumption, piece by piece, by leading those they had imprisoned to not just escape, but to fight, to reclaim, to defy. And as she crouched in the shadows, preparing for the moment when opportunity presented itself, Mara whispered a vow under her breath, as sharp as steel. They wanted weakness. They created wrath instead. Every beat of her heart reinforced the promise. Every calculated step brought her closer to Eli. And in that quiet, electric anticipation, the first threads of a rebellion began to weave themselves, unrelenting, unstoppable, human. Mara Hale moved like a shadow, silent and precise, every step calculated, every movement deliberate. The corridors of the Khar'Zhul flagship were narrow, metallic, and unforgiving, but she had memorized them in her mind, a mental map of escape routes, blind spots, and vulnerabilities. Her hands gripped the shock rifle she had stolen from a distracted guard, and the weight of it felt right, almost natural, as if it belonged to her. Each click of the weapon, each movement through vents and tunnels, was a rehearsal of control and strategy. The engineer, following silently, whispered directions and confirmations, their fear tempered by the undeniable presence of Mara's command. Even the reptilian warrior, usually silent and calculating, moved in rhythm with her, understanding instinctively that she was no ordinary human. The prisoners around her had begun to sense the shift in the air. Their despair was replaced with a cautious spark of hope. One by one, they fell into formation, not because she demanded it, but because her focus and determination created a gravity they could not resist. Mara's voice, quiet but firm, gave directions, which vents to use, when to move, how to avoid detection. She knew every guard rotation, every alarm cycle, every weak link in the Empire's security. Every minute she had spent observing and planning became a weapon, sharpened against the edge of opportunity. They encountered the first obstacle, a patrol of Khar'Zhul drones moving down a narrow corridor. Mara did not hesitate. She instructed the engineer to override a nearby control panel, redirecting the drone's sensors to another section of the ship. It worked seamlessly. The patrol passed, unaware of the humans slipping past them. Every minor victory strengthened their momentum, and Mara's confidence grew. She did not allow herself the luxury of fear, only precision and focus. Each step, each calculated move, brought them closer to Eli, and every second of delay for the aliens was a triumph. The Empire had relied on the assumption that humans were predictable, that grief made them vulnerable. Mara exploited that assumption fully. She used her appearance as a mother, her calm and quiet demeanor as a shield. Every guard who glimpsed her dismissed her as incapable of meaningful resistance. They did not anticipate the human capacity for adaptation, for innovation under pressure, for sheer relentless focus when something precious was at stake. Mara's mind raced, planning contingencies for every possible confrontation. She turned the ship's own systems against the Khar'Zhul, rerouting power, creating diversions, triggering minor failures that caused confusion and delay. The chaos she orchestrated was subtle but effective, weakening the Empire from within without ever needing to confront them directly. The group's progress was measured, careful, but unstoppable. Mara led them through maintenance shafts, down service tunnels, past sleeping quarters, and into sections of the ship rarely visited by the aliens. She maintained constant awareness, noting every structural anomaly that could be used to her advantage, every security flaw, every weak panel or unguarded corridor. The prisoners followed her not because they were trained, but because they trusted her instinct, her clarity of purpose, the raw determination that radiated from her. Even the engineer, trembling at first, began to act with precision, following her guidance without hesitation. As they moved, Mara's mind never left Eli. She pictured him strapped in the reconditioning chamber, electrodes poised, his bright eyes wide with fear. That image pushed her further, sharpened her instincts, and made her movements faster, more precise. Every step she took was measured, every decision made with the knowledge that failure was not an option. The Empire's weapons, their technology, their brute force, all of it was irrelevant against a mother who refused to yield. She was not fighting for herself, she was fighting for her child, and that made her unrelenting, unstoppable, dangerous in ways no one had prepared for. They encountered resistance, a squad of guards moving faster than expected, alerted by minor disturbances Mara had anticipated. But she did not falter. She used the shock rifle with precision, targeting non-lethal points to incapacitate rather than kill, allowing the prisoners to move without panic. The engineer and the reptilian warrior followed her lead, neutralizing obstacles and ensuring no one was left behind. Every action was deliberate, every move part of a larger plan to reclaim what had been taken. The aliens had expected humans to panic, to cry, to submit. Mara disproved their assumption at every turn. The ship's alarms blared, the sound echoing through the corridors, but Mara used it as cover. She guided the prisoners through emergency tunnels, through areas the Khar'Zhul rarely monitored, exploiting their overconfidence and routine. Every challenge strengthened her focus, every close call honed her instincts. The Empire's greatest mistake had been underestimating the human mind, the human heart, the human capacity for ingenuity and resilience. Mara turned that weakness into strength, moving with clarity, precision, and unyielding determination. Finally, they reached the threshold of the reconditioning sector. Mara paused, her gaze locking on the chamber that held Eli. The air seemed to tighten, the hum of the ship growing louder in her ears. Her fury was no longer a private fire, it had become a weapon, honed to perfection, ready to destroy anyone who dared stand in her way. The prisoners around her sensed it, moved in synchrony, ready to fight if necessary, but trusting her judgment completely. Mara Hale had become more than a mother. She was a force of nature, a strategist, a leader, and a storm about to break. She whispered to herself, barely audible, yet carrying the weight of inevitability. Every step brought us here. Nothing will stop me now. And with that, she advanced, unwavering, towards the place where her child was held, knowing that the rebellion she had ignited would not be contained, that every chain, every cell, every barrier erected by the Empire would crumble beneath the force of human will and unrelenting fury. The first threads of revolution were no longer theoretical. They were real, moving, alive, and Mara Hale was at the center of it, unstoppable, focused, and ready to reclaim what was hers. Mara Hale reached the chamber where Eli was held, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to a single point, her child's fear-stricken face. Electrodes bristled along the table, cables poised to rewrite memory, to erase the essence of who he was. The Khar'Zhul scientists, confident in their instruments and in their perceived superiority, had never accounted for the force of a mother's determination, the instinctive precision born of desperation. Mara's breath was steady, her mind clear, every plan she had rehearsed crystallizing into immediate action. She did not hesitate, did not flinch, and did not allow the surge of rage to cloud her judgment. This was control, focused fury, lethal only in its efficiency. The guards moved first, relying on reflex and armor, believing their numbers and weapons sufficient to suppress her. Mara met them not with fear but with strategy. She anticipated their motions, sidestepped, struck, and used the shock rifle with surgical accuracy. Every hit incapacitated, every move created space for her advance. Her size, her human fragility, was irrelevant. Speed, intelligence, and resolve became her weapons. The guards expected compliance, weakness, hesitation. They were confronted instead with relentless precision, a force that could not be reasoned with, only survived. They faltered, unsure of how to respond to something they had never considered, human ferocity amplified by love. Eli's terrified cries only sharpened her focus. She ignored the heat of the room, the blaring alarms, and the chaos surrounding her. Each step, each movement, was a calculated measure toward freeing him. The engineer's instruments and the guards' attempts to restrain her became background noise, irrelevant to the singular purpose driving her forward. Mara had transformed grief into action, loss into tactical genius, and instinct into controlled power. The human heart, the Khar'Zhul did not understand, was capable of endurance and aggression that no machine could measure, no technology could suppress, no army could overcome. She reached the table, disarming and disabling the devices with swift, decisive motions. Eli struggled, restrained but aware of his mother's presence, hope igniting in his eyes despite fear. Mara's hands worked with a practiced precision, loosening restraints, redirecting power flows, neutralizing security measures. The scientists panicked, realizing too late that their technology was useless against the human mind behind it. They attempted to flee, to engage, to call reinforcements, but Mara's control of the environment was complete. Improvised traps, rerouted power, and subtle sabotage turned the chamber into a labyrinth where only she could navigate safely. Every barrier the Empire had relied upon collapsed beneath her calculated fury. The prisoners she had led through the ship now followed, moving in synchrony to protect her and Eli. They became extensions of her strategy, instruments of her human ingenuity. Each alien species, initially skeptical of human capability, now recognized the power of focused determination, the unpredictability of a mother whose child was in danger. Mara did not command with words. Her actions set the tempo, her presence enforced cooperation. The rebellion she had sparked now converged into a single, unstoppable force, guided by instinct, intelligence, and the raw energy of maternal fury. She lifted Eli from the table, holding him close. His small body trembled against hers, but his fear was mitigated by the certainty of her presence. He was safe, not because the Empire had failed, but because one human refused to accept its supremacy. Mara's fury did not subside. It sharpened, redirected toward the obstacles remaining in their path. Each guard, each soldier, each officer who underestimated her would now experience firsthand the cost of misjudging human resolve. She did not speak. She did not hesitate. Her movements were precise, her decisions immediate, and the force of her will reshape the battlefield around her. Varkalon, observing through the surveillance network, felt the first ripple of doubt, quickly turning to disbelief. Reports reached him, prisoners moving, guards incapacitated, equipment disabled, chaos spreading through the flagship. Yet he could not comprehend why one human female, carrying a single child, could dismantle the order his empire had relied upon for centuries. He tried to assert control remotely, to deploy reinforcements, but the measures he enacted were anticipated, neutralized before they could take effect. Every action was countered, every move predicted, every advantage of the Empire nullified by a single mother whose rage had been disciplined into strategy. Mara guided Eli and the prisoners through corridors previously considered secure, each passage becoming a corridor of liberation. They moved efficiently, with coordination and awareness, each step eroding the Empire's control. Mara's presence was magnetic, her authority unspoken but absolute. The human's adaptability, her intelligence, and her relentless drive were impossible to resist or counter. Every attempt by the Khar'Zhul to regain control failed, turning their own systems and weapons against them, engineered by observation, intuition, and human ingenuity. Mara's fury had become more than emotion, it was a force shaping reality. As alarms blared and reinforcements converged, Mara's calculated aggression turned obstacles into tools. She repurposed energy conduits, disabled security turrets, and used the architecture of the ship to create barriers between her group and the enemy. Every encounter with resistance was brief and precise. Hesitation was fatal, but Mara's focus eliminated doubt. The prisoners followed seamlessly, inspired by her clarity and unwavering will. The Empire had believed in fear as a weapon, in obedience as a shield, in intimidation as deterrence. Mara proved all three illusions. Finally, they neared the threshold to the throne chamber. The tension thickened, but Mara did not falter. Eli clutched her, small and trusting, yet emboldened by her courage. The rebellion, initiated by one human's wrath and guided by her intelligence, had transformed into a movement unstoppable by any technological advantage or numerical superiority. Varkalon watched, powerless to comprehend, as the very foundations of his authority began to crumble. Mara Hale was not just a mother anymore, she had become the embodiment of human unpredictability, endurance, and unstoppable resolve. The Empire's control, once absolute, was now fragile, teetering on the brink of collapse, because they had failed to account for what humans truly became when protecting what mattered most. She whispered to herself, steady and unflinching, a vow and a declaration. "No one will take what is mine! No empire can stop a mother who refuses to yield." And with that, she stepped forward, carrying Eli into the heart of the chaos she had created, prepared to confront the source of the Empire's arrogance, the alien king who had dared call humans cowards. Mara Hale stepped into the throne chamber, Eli clinging to her side, his small hand wrapped around hers. The room was vast, cold, and imposing, a monument to the alien king's arrogance. Varkalon the Unbroken regarded her with a mixture of disbelief and irritation, his prideful voice echoing across the hall as he attempted to intimidate her. "Human female, you are outmatched. Surrender, and your child will be spared." Every word was calculated, meant to provoke fear, meant to bend her to his will. Mara did not flinch. She did not even breathe heavily. Her fury was silent, controlled, a coiled force more dangerous than any weapon in the galaxy. She was a mother, and that made her unstoppable. The Khar'Zhul guards inside the chambers shifted nervously, sensing the shift in control, sensing that the momentum Mara had carried through the ship had not broken but grown stronger. She had led the prisoners through corridors, neutralized threats, and manipulated technology they believed absolute. The rebellion she had orchestrated now culminated in this confrontation, and every move she had made was converging on this single moment. Varkalon's attempts at authority were meaningless against a human who had nothing to lose and everything to reclaim. Mara's eyes locked on the king. She did not speak immediately. Her gaze alone conveyed the magnitude of her wrath, the intensity of her purpose. This was not blind rage, it was deliberate, precise, and deadly. The alien king, for all his power, had never faced an opponent like this. He relied on size, strength, fleets, intimidation, all irrelevant against a human fueled by maternal instinct and strategic genius. Mara moved first, fluidly, calculating each step, each motion, anticipating every reaction. The guards reacted, but their numbers and weapons were insufficient. Each movement she made was a strike, a disruption, a demonstration that fear was ineffective against resolve. Varkalon tried to assert dominance, unleashing energy blasts, summoning reinforcements, deploying automated defense drones. Mara anticipated each one, diverting, dodging, neutralizing. She used the environment as her weapon, turning the throne chamber itself into an advantage. Every column, every ledge, every conduit became part of her strategy. The guards faltered, overwhelmed not by raw force but by precision, unpredictability, and the relentless drive of a mother unwilling to lose her child. The engineer and the reptilian warrior assisted seamlessly, disabling systems and guiding the prisoners through cover, but it was Mara's vision, her leadership, and her unwavering fury that dictated the flow of combat. Eli watched, terrified yet mesmerized, as his mother moved with unrelenting determination. Mara shielded him, directing him to stay close, to trust her instincts, and to remain calm. She whispered to him in brief, steady tones, "Stay with me. Nothing will stop us." The words were simple, but carried the weight of certainty. For a moment, Eli saw not just a mother, but a force of nature, a being whose focus could topple empires. The Khar'Zhul's arrogance evaporated with every calculated step she took, every obstacle she overcame. The alien king, now forced to intervene personally, confronted her directly. His size, armor, and raw strength were imposing, but Mara's speed, adaptability, and intuition allowed her to counter his attacks. He struck with precision, but she anticipated patterns, used his own momentum against him, dodged when necessary, and retaliated with moves he could not predict. His technology, meant to dominate, proved ineffective against the combination of her intelligence, experience, and raw, emotional force. Every strike she made was purposeful, a demonstration that humans were not only resilient but unpredictable. Varkalon's frustration grew. He realized that he could not break her with fear, that no threat, no weapon, no command would bend her to his will. Mara's fury had become a palpable force, reshaping the battlefield, shifting power, turning the Empire's instruments of control against them. The guards hesitated, the technology failed, and the king's confidence crumbled under the weight of one human mother's unyielding determination. His voice faltered, his commands slowed, and the perception of absolute authority dissolved. Mara moved with precision, striking, disabling, and directing the chaos toward the Empire's weakness, their hubris. Finally, Mara disarmed the king, forcing him to recognize the truth that had been invisible until now. She did not gloat. She did not hesitate. she freed the prisoners, signaling a mass release, turning the entire flagship into a collapse of control. The Empire's myth of invincibility shattered in the face of one mother's wrath. Mara's actions were swift, decisive, and irreversible. Every measure the Khar'Zhul had relied upon was neutralized by the ingenuity, resolve, and fury of a human who refused to accept loss. The rebellion she had initiated became a tidal wave, sweeping away fear, oppression, and arrogance. She held Eli tightly, guiding him through the aftermath. The prisoners were free, the Empire's order dismantled, and the king humbled before the strength of a human who fought not for conquest, not for glory, but for love. Mara's message was clear, unspoken but understood by all: humans do not bow, humans do not yield, and humans will protect their own at any cost. The galaxy had assumed humanity's weakness was in its fragility, in its size, in its emotions. Mara had proven them wrong. One mother's fury had become a catalyst, reshaping the perception of humans across systems, imprinting fear, respect, and caution in every corner of the Empire. As the survivors rallied, Mara whispered to Eli, her voice soft now but resolute. "No one calls us cowards again." He clung to her, understanding the truth in her words, seeing not just survival but triumph, not just fear but the birth of reputation forged in fire and determination. Mara Hale had transformed from a grieving mother into the embodiment of human unpredictability, intelligence, and unwavering courage. The Khar'Zhul Dominion would remember this day, the day a mother became a force more dangerous than fleets, more intelligent than machines, and more relentless than any army. The Empire's control had collapsed, and Mara led the survivors from the flagship. Her fury remained, tempered now by the relief of victory, but her resolve was permanent. The galaxy would speak of this not as the victory of a soldier or a fleet, but as the triumph of a mother, a human who refused to accept defeat, a force that had reshaped history with intelligence, strategy, and unyielding love. Mara Hale carried her son forward, not just into freedom, but into legend, ensuring that humanity would never again be underestimated, never again dismissed as cowards, and never again misunderstood.